Bleeding devil!
Mr. Thorstein, why are you here?
Yes, I'm here because I'm not there.
Right. Where have you been? I thought you were gone for good.
Oh, I've been through hell, quite literally.
The Old Norse hell or the Christian?
Oh, the latter. What a ghastly place.
Was it because of the fires? Too hot? I can't stand the heat.
Oh, no, it's not that hot down there. It's much worse up here with global warming and all. I thought to myself, if it's this hot down here, I can't even imagine in Australia.
What were you doing down there anyway?
Oh, I was on an errand, and I found some of me old raiding mates.
I'm sorry that your friends are in hell. Was it because of the raiding, pillaging and burning?
Oh, no, nothing of the sort. They had just converted to Christianity before they died. There's a surprisingly number of popes down there. Anyway, I brought you a letter. It's from your grandfather.
Thank you. My grandfather is in hell?
Well, he was a Christian, wasn't he?
It's blank. There's nothing written on it.
Well, your grandfather was a poet, so his personal hell is having his hands chopped off so he can never write again.
Son of a witch. That is horrible.
So, any changes up here while I was gone?
Not much. Things are certainly changing, but very slowly. Not fast enough. Doom is at hand and Ragnarok is nigh.
Good! I didn't want to miss the fun. Oh, I'm going to drink some wine now.
Wine? You used to prefer beer.
Well, we are YouTubers now, aren't we? We have to be sophisticated. Well, ta-da!
Hello everyone, how are you? I'm Ari Thurger and today I'm going to talk about the Atheist Pagans, or atheism in paganism. However, I'm not going to focus on atheism in pagan antiquity, but rather focus on this growing movement within modern atheism and Neo-Paganism. Atheist pagans, that's got to be a Christian's worst nightmare. Not only are they atheists, they are also pagans. Double the trouble to convert. When Christians came in contact with pagans, they were like bloody godless heathens. And now with atheist pagans, we really have the true definition of godless heathens. Now, jokes aside, as strange as it might seem and perhaps even contradictory at first, it's actually very reasonable. We often assume paganisms to be polytheistic and a great focus around the deities, and obviously atheism neither believes in gods nor maintains practical displays of a spiritual or religious belief. No magic working, no ritual, no ceremony, not even prayer to entities deemed to be divine, which is something present within paganism. So, it's rather curious atheism within paganism. One thing is the existence of atheism in pagan antiquity, when some people of a society held on to their religious belief systems while others within that same society chose to be atheists. Another thing are people within modern paganism who consider themselves both pagan and atheists. Perhaps the confusion lies in our perception of paganism and the term pagan. In a very general and brief panorama, a term that starts off as a person, dweller of the countryside, the pagos, as a rural subdivision of a territory, and the individual was the paganos, the pagan. In a moment of religious transition, as more Romans became Christians, the term came to mean someone who had not yet converted to the new religion, holding on to a particular native cultural identity of non-Christian belief systems, and the term later becoming anyone who is not a Christian, Jew or Muslim, or rather someone who does not belong to the large religions, even someone who is anti-religious, such as an atheist. But of course, things change, and a pagan these days is someone who indeed isn't a Christian, Jew or Muslim, but also someone whose religious and spiritual practices are focused on belief systems which, in essence, are prior to the formation and spread of Abrahamic religious systems. And it could be indeed as clear as this, and everyone that isn't Christian, Jew, or Muslim is a pagan. And that's it. We are done for the day. However, Neo-Paganism has become a strong cultural identity, several strong cultural identities, and we cannot simply say that every belief system that isn't of those three particular religions previously mentioned and their ramifications to be a paganism. Zoroastrianism isn't Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, but it's not a paganism either. Buddhism isn't Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, but it isn't a paganism either, even though there are some animistic conceptions in it. It isn't a paganism. Animism itself. Paganism draws its roots from animism, but so does Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Animism can be found in practically almost every religion, or let's say a basis of religion, but that doesn't make such religions animisms. Many paganisms have a strong animistic worldview, but they are not fully animisms, and there's even animistic pagans. But even though paganism can be animistic, not every animism is paganism. Animism is animism. Animism and pagan animists or animistic pagans rarely place the divine as the main focus of a belief system, and the gods are secondary or indeed play no role at all. No priority is given to deities, and it's more of a pragmatic behavior to honor the whole community of living beings, with a more practical approach towards the populations of persons within the world, in the sense of living entities who, in their great majority, are not human persons. And there's an attempt to create symbiotic relationships with the others in order to minimize damage and harm in life as a whole. So, does this mean that a paganism is specifically a type of animism that focuses on several deities? Well, yes and no. Many paganisms can be polytheistic, but not all paganisms are polytheistic, and certainly not all polytheisms are pagan either. Take the example of Hinduism. Hinduism is often considered a paganism mostly because it isn't one of the three main monotheistic world religions. So if it has several gods, well, it must be a paganism, surely. However, Hinduism may have a considerable amount of animistic elements, but it isn't animism, and it may have several gods and pagan belief systems in it, but it is hardly a paganism just because it is polytheistic. Because there may be a practical and or theoretical display of faith towards the several gods in Hinduism on specific occasions, rituals, ceremonies, and whatnot, but many of the gods within Hinduism are understood to be manifestations of a single entity, or even manifestations that create different aspects of the same one creating force or energy, whilst in pagan polytheisms the gods are usually understood to be distinct entities, distinct individualities. Just like in Hinduism, Wicca, as a modern neo-paganism with its own ramifications, assert that there is ultimately one divinity, even though they venerate all of its manifestations. Wicca, a neo-paganism, more often than not, is a monotheism when the focus is on the great goddess, or on several feminine deities or entities who are understood to be the many aspects of the one great goddess. Surely, sometimes there's also the focus on the goddess and her male counterpart, the god. And indeed, many Wiccans consider these two polarities as manifestations of the one underlying reality, as the single creating force or energy. But more often than not, they believe that these two deities express the dynamic polarity of feminine and masculine forms of energy, which doesn't make Wiccans polytheistic, but rather monotheistic, or at the very least, a duotheism, although they are considered pagan nonetheless. And as said before, most polytheistic paganisms understand the gods to be individual entities and not aspects of the same creator entity. But also many paganisms have a secondary focus or no focus at all on deities. and are simply not polytheistic, but the focus is much more centered on animistic perspectives, more on the visible and invisible populations of the world, such as elves, ancestors, wights, elementals, weather persons, prominent landscape features, local spirits, etc., rather than a focus on deities. Take the example of Hiddenry, another Neo-Paganism, which can or cannot have a predisposition to manifest belief towards gods. Polytheism within Hiddenry is far more explicit than within Wicca. Some heathens acknowledge the existence of all deities, even those of other religions, but pay a particular attention to just a few deities usually determined to be central to Hiddenry. And heathens commonly make offerings to honor the particular attributes of each deity, and the gods are seen much more like humans. So there's a predisposition to form relationships with deities, as such deities are understood to be real individuals. Likewise, many heathens also present a particular display of belief towards other entities that are not divine, such as ancestors, land spirits, elves. The same thing happens in Celtic-based Neo-Paganisms, and a great focus on the individual entities understood to be divine, but also to the spirits of place, of the house, of the environment that surrounds us, and the creation of a relationship with the others, just like in Animism. But many pagans do not focus on the gods, and rather on the others. And I think most witches are the ones that actually might understand this a little bit better, in a better way. As in witchcraft, the divine seldom or not at all plays any role in the pragmatic behavior, but the witch often counts on familiar spirits, the belief in doubles, domestic spirits, invisible others, helpers, tutelary spirits. Witchcraft ends up being more animistic than most modern paganisms. Witchcraft is a practical display or a practical manifestation of animism, and may or may not be pagan. So what exactly is a paganism? Well, truth be told, there isn't an easy answer that points to a single truth, because paganisms are a wondrous variety of perspectives and perceptions of the world, and there are as many perceptions as there are eyes to see. There are as many paganisms as there are individual minds that experience life and try to understand the information that comprises life through a magical religious spectrum in order to be better immersed within life. In other words, paganisms are world-accepting views, which focus on the world and life in it, and all its populations. Not only human and animal populations, but the populations of other persons such as ancestors, gods, land spirits, elves, Sylvians, fairies, and so on and so forth. A great focus on the world and all life and the lives within a broader existence that comprise a cycle of which we are all part of and interconnected. Hence the need to create symbiotic relationships with the several different entities of the world in order to construct a more pleasant and immersed existence. And for that, a series of annual celebrations, ceremonies, and rituals are created as forms of manifestations of desire towards the building of relationships and to maintain, renew, and honor the important relationships. Instead of being world-denying religions, focusing on a life elsewhere, out of this world, on some eternal paradise for the soul, and instead of an individual focus, right? So, what makes a paganism is having a world-accepting view, embracing the physical world and the life that comprises it, focusing on the building of relationships for the benefit of the human community and the extended community, which are the other living entities within the world. Now, this comes pretty close in some aspects to atheism, which focuses much more on the world, on the physical world and life in it, and on the building of healthy relationships, but only on a limited perception of life, which is the one that can be immediately seen or felt, instead of a broader perception of life, like in paganism, which is extended to a more animistic belief, which is the belief in the presence of invisible others. Not particularly ghosts, of course, but entities with their own individuality and personality and unique characteristics, and even with their own cultures and forms of communication, whose existence is simply not immediately perceptible by the limitations of the human physical structure. So, basically, atheists are not so different from pagans if we focus on the world-accepting characteristics and a better and stronger predisposition to be and feel immersed in the world and all life, because it is the here and now that matters. And both atheists and pagans have their own displays of practical behavior through ceremonies, rituals, and celebrations to facilitate the contact and the building of relationships with the populations of the world. So, one thing most pagans have in common is getting together to celebrate a festival or perform a ritual, usually with the aim of building or maintaining or renewing relationships with the land and all that comprises it. Some of these practical behaviors might also be aimed towards a particular belief system, towards a deity or deities or spirits. So I guess that means atheist pagans are there for the party only. Well, that's not entirely wrong. Atheism is indeed present in some modern pagan religious manifestations, and it's quite curious. Again, many people believe that for someone to be pagan, they have to follow a set of deities, or, in other words, being polytheistic. However, paganism isn't about polytheism, not only and not just. There are many polytheistic religions, again, such as Hinduism, that are actually quite monotheistic, seeing the gods as several manifestations of the same creating force. Paganism, as I said many times, it's about world-accepting views, and that is already very present in many atheists, embracing life and the world and all that it encompasses. Indeed, for many ancient pagans, the gods were often secondary within their daily activities, although people were not atheists per se, but rather with animistic patterns of mentality that made them get more in contact with the visible and invisible populations of the world rather than the gods. There wasn't a particular fervent devotion to deities as there is nowadays in some Neo-Paganisms, which is just a reflection of the widespread monotheistic religions several pagans have been born into or previously had a great contact with before the shift of religion or spirituality. So it's not uncommon to see atheism in modern paganism, as many atheist pagans prefer to stick with the earth as something sacred, not an entity or a deity, but as the natural sacredness of life, and thus their rites and celebrations are towards the earth and life as the only form of pure sacredness, more on the grounds of celebrating nature as it is, not a deity, not a particular creating force and a display of devotion towards its anthropomorphization or abstract conception of an entity, but simply celebrating life and the earth as it is. So atheist pagans usually celebrate the natural environment, making them neither religious nor irreligious, but simply a different perspective towards the sacredness of life, living ethical and environmentally responsible lives. It wasn't a very common phenomenon, but it exists, and I believe it is increasing. It is surely increasing because most people are progressively conducting their lives towards an environmentally responsible existence, which could already be found within animism and paganism. So people are drawn to it. And some atheists as well, because life doesn't have to be particularly conducted towards a religious approach and the perception of giving an identity, personality, and an almost humanization to the earth. But a respect for the earth and its life can be displayed through a variety of actions that are solely aiming towards the sacredness of life and the natural sacredness of the earth that harbors all life and sustains life, without the need of deifying it. So, since many paganisms already have annual celebrations and festivities towards life itself and the building of relationships towards life and its persons, atheist pagans have the same approach, minus the more magical religious aspects and the deification and animation through identity of nature. In a way, atheist pagans are there for the party and for the respect towards the sacredness of life and the preservation of that respect towards the earth itself. So, atheist pagans participate and make certain pagan celebrations and annual festivities, but while pagans might conduct their celebratory and ritualistic behaviors towards particular entities that are neither human nor animal, the atheist pagan or pagans construct or conduct it all towards life, as it is, as something real that unites all living beings. And that includes, for instance, an active participation towards the sacredness of the four elements, earth, wind, fire, and water, which are also often celebrated and honored by pagans in pagan ceremonies. Although some pagans may consider the four elements as powerful beings, atheist pagans can do the exact same celebrations, but towards the elements as they are, as powerful natural phenomena that continuously co-create the world and maintain the flow of life. Many pagans also display the need to show honor and to celebrate certain animals within their own belief systems. An atheist pagan will do the exact same thing, but towards the animal as it is, towards its existence and the sacredness and natural beauty of that existence. The thing with paganisms is that it does not create or even encourage systematizing a set of beliefs that usually leads to religious canons and dogmas. So it's a lot more open and free to a series of personalized displays of belief and how people feel more comfortable in creating relationships with whoever and whatever exists within the world. And paganism is indeed an engagement with the earth as the home of hundreds of thousands of billions of different life forms in a space in a wider cosmos. And paganism, just like animism, deals with things sensibly and realistically, dealing with what is in the world and everything that comprises it. An engagement with life and the building of relationships with the persons of the world in an environment we all share. So it isn't that hard to understand the existence of atheist pagans who feel more comfortable in engaging with life through a pagan perspective to honor and give respect to the sacredness of life and the natural elements and forces and energies that compose life and perpetuate life in an endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth, which are aspects of life that naturally occur. Paganism and animism are about engagement with life and the building of relationships, which are often through a pragmatic behavior with a magical religious character. Atheist pagans will have the exact same approach, minus the magical religious perception. The important factor that paganism, animism, and atheistic paganism have in common is precisely living an ethically and environmentally responsible life. Alright, my dear friends, I hope today's video was useful and perhaps a little bit mind opener, and I very much hope you have enjoyed it. As always, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And, tack för idag. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje.